Yes. Well, will you look at that? It's time for another audiobook here at the Grand Library at the Lagoon. I hope you all very much enjoyed The Temple by Howard Phillips Lovecraft. And I'm sure some of you very much notice the lack of tie that I have in this video and in the previous video. Unfortunately, due to circumstances at the Lagoon, my illustrious black tie flew off of my collar and fell into the darkest, vile reaches of the Lagoon, never to be seen again. And unfortunately, here out in the Lagoon, it is really very hard to find the adequate clothing to meet the dress code standards of the Grand Library. However, being Gill-boy myself, I have made an exception. So those that do visit the Grand Library, if you are not in adequate dress code, such as myself, without the accompanied tie, you're still more than welcome to come and check out any books that you may want here, as well as sit at my feet and allow me to serenade you with my voice once more. Now, as previously stated, I'm going to re-record some of my previous audiobooks. And for those that have already watched the, poorer production qualities of those and still stayed, I don't have words to express my gratitude. And I do so hope that the horrific buzzing that may be persistent in these videos will not bother you or drive you into madness. For after all, we are delving into Lovecraft territory, and as you know, as soon as you start reading his words, that unfortunate, unpleasant being whose name shall not ever be spoken aloud, although it was spoken aloud in last video. I wonder why there's those buzzing and the infernal pipings and tom-toms that some may hear when we read these tales. Now, we are going to be reading a very personal favorite of Gill-boy's, Dagon. In case y'all don't listen to black metal or death metal, I will repeat that. Dagon is what we're going to be reading. Now, Dagon is a short story by the American horror author H.P. Lovecraft, otherwise known as Howard Phillips Lovecraft. H.P.L. in the house! It was written in July 1917 and is one of the first stories that Lovecraft wrote as an adult. And it was first published in November 1919 edition of The Vagrant, issue number 11. Dagon was later then published in Weird Tales in October 1923, and it is considered by many to be one of Lovecraft's most forward-looking stories. And it has a feature-length film based off of it, although, to be fair, those that have seen the film and have read The Shadow over Innsmouth will be the first to tell you that it's more of an adaptation of The Shadow over Innsmouth rather than Dagon. Although, Dagon is more or less the prequel to The Shadow over Innsmouth, and this story is what really kind of pivoted us into what would later be considered and coined the Cthulhu mythos. Although hardcore Lovecraft nerds know that Cthulhu is not necessarily the main entity of the stories, although he is surely the most popular and looks the most cool. He's totally metal looking. But Yog-Sothoth is actually meant to be the main entity and the main antagonist, protagonist, however you want to look at it. So Lovecraft originally wanted his mythology to be called Yog-Sothory. But, he passed, unfortunately, and is no longer with us, and died before he could actually write a full-blown novel. So the majority of his works are short stories and novellas. Although, in my opinion, The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath is more or less of a novel, but I guess technically speaking I don't have a master's degree in literature, so I would be incorrect in stating that, and they would tell me, no, Gill-boy, know your place, it's a novella. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. So he never really wrote a full novel, but Dagon is a very, this is where you're going to start seeing the really creepy fish monsters, the allusion to a higher, deeper cosmology within the universe that he establishes, And in future videos, I will really delve really deep into the cosmology and the theology of his dark religion that he's created. Lovecraft more or less created a different philosophy known as cosmicism, the insignificance of humanity and the scheme of the cosmos, where more of the Abrahamic faiths view us as the central focus of the universe, created by a very passionate, loving God that's involved with humanity. Lovecraft kind of takes those concepts and subverts them and shows how there is no loving God. There's just full of cosmic horrors that are indifferent to humanity or don't care about us or view us as cattle. So it's very metal, and you see how it spawned a lot of black metal bands, death metal bands, stuff of that nature, and a lot of great kind of cheesy 80s horror films. We will discuss, I guess, the Dagon movie, although there's not really much to say because we're not reading Shadow over Innsmouth, but I'll touch bases on it after we read the story. And so I hope that you all have your drinks and you're all cozy and comfy, and I will hopefully do this story great justice. Now, there are some adaptations of it on YouTube by personal animators, and kind of personal fan films. I would highly recommend you all check those out. I think, what is it, The Lone Animator. I apologize if I get your new YouTube name wrong. But he has a really awesome adaptation of this. It's like stop motion, stuff like that. Again, this could easily be adapted into a short story. Like, I'm surprised that a company such as Netflix or Amazon or HBO hasn't produced an anthology series like Tales of the Crypts or Creepshow based on the writings of Lovecraft. But seeing as how the standard of Hollywood is now, I'm pretty sure it would. It's probably a good thing that has not happened. But like I said, we still have a lot of good animations, some that are stop motion, some that are cartoons of this tale. There's also a phenomenal video game that if I was a literature teacher, I would give extra credit to my students if they bought the game and played it, because it's basically an audiobook that you can play as a game, and it's phenomenal. And I will hopefully upload that video sometime in October of next year. So without further ado, let us read Dagon. And if you see here, I don't know if you can. This is rather interesting for me. Whoever previously owned this ranked the stories, and they give Dagon an A. I have to agree with that. Although I am a fanboy, so I would actually say I actually disagree with you. I would give it an A+. But let me know in the comment section if you agree or disagree with Gill-boy's rating. Without further ado, as we dangerously approach the 9-minute mark, let us read Dagon by H.P. Lovecraft. I am writing this under an appreciable mental strain, since by tonight I shall be no more. Penniless and at the end of my supply of the drug which alone makes life endurable, I can bear the torture no longer, and I shall cast myself from this garret window into the squalid street below. Do not think from my slavery to morphine that I am a weakling or a degenerate. When you have read these hastily scrawled pages, you may guess, though never fully realize, why it is that I must have forgetfulness or death. It was in the most open and least frequented parts of the broad Pacific that the packet of which I was supercargo fell a victim to the German sea raider. The Great War was then at its very beginning, and the ocean forces of the Hun had not completely sunk to their later degradation, so that our vessel was made a legitimate prize, whilst we and her crew were treated with all the fairness and consideration due us as naval prisoners. So liberal, indeed, was the discipline of our captors that 5 days after we were taken I managed to escape alone in a small boat with water and provisions for a good length of time. When I finally found myself adrift and free, I had but little idea of my surroundings. Never a competent navigator, I could only guess vaguely by the sun and stars that I was somewhat south of the equator. Of the longitude I knew nothing, and of no island or coastline was in sight. The weather kept fair, and for uncounted days I drifted aimlessly beneath the scorching sun, waiting either for some passing ship or to be cast on the shores of some habitable land. But neither ship nor land appeared, and I began to despair in my solitude upon the heaving vastness of unbroken blue. The change happened whilst I slept. Its details I shall never know, for my slumber, though troubled and dream-infested, was continuous. When at last I awaked, it was to discover myself half sucked into a slimy expanse of hellish black mire, which extended about me in monotonous undulations as far as I could see, and in which my boat lay grounded some distance away. Though one might well imagine that my first sensation would be of wonder at so prodigious and unexpected a transformation of scenery, I was in reality more horrified than astonished, for there was in the air and in the rotting soil sinister quality which chilled me to the very core. The region was putrid with the carcasses of decaying fish and of other less indescribable things that I saw protruding from the nasty mud of the unending plain. Perhaps I should not hope to convey in mere words the unutterable hideousness that can dwell in absolute silence and barren immensity. There was nothing within hearing and nothing in sight save a vast reach of black slime, yet the very completeness of the stillness of the homogeneity of the landscape oppressed me with a nauseating fear. The sun was blazing down from a sky which seemed to me almost black in its cloudless cruelty, as though reflecting the inky marsh beneath my feet. As I crawled into the stranded boat, I realized that only one theory could explain my position. Through some unprecedented volcanic upheaval, a portion of the ocean floor must have been thrown to the surface, exposing regions which for innumerable millions of years had lain hidden under unfathomable watery depths. So great was the extent of the new land which had risen beneath me that I could not detect the faintest noise of the surging ocean, strain my ears as I might, nor were there any seafowl to prey upon the dread things. For several hours I sat thinking or brooding in the boat, which lay upon its side and afforded a slight shade as the sun moved across the heavens. As the day progressed, the ground lost some of its stickiness, and seemed likely to dry sufficiently for traveling purposes in a short time. That night I slept but little, and the next day I made for myself a pack containing food and water, preparatory to an overland journey in search of the vanished sea and possible rescue. On the third morning I found the soil dry enough to walk upon with ease. The odor of the fish was maddening, but I was too much concerned with graver things to mind so slight an evil, and set out boldly for an unknown goal. All day I forged steadily westward, guided by a faraway hummock, which rose higher than any other elevation on the rolling desert. That night I encamped, and on the following day still traveled towards the hummock, though the object seemed scarcely nearer than when I had first despised it. By the fourth evening I attained the base of the mound, which turned out to be much higher than it had appeared from a distance. An intervening valley setting out in sharper relief from the general surface, too weary to ascend, I slept in the shadow of the hill. I know not why my dreams were so wild that night, but ere the waning and fantastically gibbous moon had risen far above the eastern plain, I was awake in a cold perspiration, determined to sleep no more. Such visions as I had experienced were too much for me to endure again, and in the glow of the moon I saw how unwise I had been to travel by day. Without the glare of the parching sun, my journey would have cost me less energy. Indeed, I now felt quite able to perform the ascent which had deterred me at sunset. Picking up my pack, I started for the crest of the eminence. I have said that the unbroken monotony of the rolling plain was a source of vague horror to me, but I think my horror was greater when I gained the summit of the mound and looked down the other side into an immeasurable pit or canyon, whose black recesses the moon had not yet soared high enough to illumine. I felt myself on the edge of the world, peering over the rim into a fathomless chaos of eternal night. Through my terror ran curious reminiscence of Paradise Lost, and Satan's hideous climb through the unfashioned realms of darkness. As the moon climbed higher in the sky, I began to see that the slopes of the valley were not quite so perpendicular as I had imagined. Legends and outcroppings of rock afforded fairly easy footholds for descent, whilst after a drop of a few hundred feet the declivity became very gradual. Urged on by an impulse which I cannot definitely analyze, I scrambled with difficulty down the rocks and stood on the gentler slope beneath, gazing into the Stygian depths, where no light had yet penetrated. All at once my attention was captured by a vast and singular object on the opposite slope, which rose steeply about 100 yards ahead of me, an object that gleamed whitely in the newly bestowed rays of the ascending moon. That it was merely a gigantic piece of stone, I soon assured myself, but I was conscious of a distant impression that its contour and position were not altogether the work of nature. A closer scrutiny filled me with sensations I cannot express, for despite its enormous magnitude and its position in an abyss which had yawned at the bottom of the sea since the world was young, I perceived beyond a doubt that the strange object was a well-shaped monolith, whose massive bulk had known the workmanship and perhaps the worship of living and thinking creatures. Dazed and frightened, yet not without a certain thrill of the scientist's or archaeologist's delight, I examined my surroundings more closely. The moon, now near the zenith, shone weirdly and vividly above the towering steps that hemmed in the chasm, and revealed the fact that a far-flung body of water flowed at the bottom, winding out of sight in both directions, and almost lapping my feet as I stood on the slope across the chasm. The wavelets washed the base of the cyclopean monolith, on whose surface I could now trace both inscriptions and crude sculptures. The writing was in a system of hieroglyphics unknown to me, and unlike anything I'd ever seen in books, consisting for the most part of conventionalized aquatic symbols such as fishes, eels, octopi, crustaceans, mollusks, whales, and the like. Several characters obviously represented marine things which are unknown to the modern world, but whose decomposing forms I had observed on the ocean-risen plain. It was the pictorial carving, however, that did most to hold me spellbound. Plainly visible across the intervening water on account of their enormous size was an array of bas-reliefs, whose objects would have excited the envy of Dor. I think that these things were supposed to depict men, at least a certain sort of men, though the creatures were shown disporting like fishes in the waters of some marine grotto, or paying homage to at some monolithic shrine which appeared to be under the waves as well. On their faces and forms I dare not speak in detail, for the mere remembrance makes me grow faint. Grotesque beyond the imagination of a Poe or of a Bulwer, they were damnably human in general outline, despite webbed hands and feet. Shockingly wide and flabby lips, glassy bulging eyes, and other features less pleasant to recall. Curiously enough, they seemed to have been chiseled badly out of proportion with their scenic background, for one of the creatures was shown in the act of killing a whale, represented as a little bit larger than himself. I remark, as I say, their grotesqueness and strange size, but at a moment decided that they were merely the imaginary gods of some primitive fishing or seafaring tribe. Some tribe whose last descendant had perished eras before the first ancestors of the Blightdown or Neanderthal man was born. Awestruck at this unexpected glimpse into a past beyond the conception of the most daring anthropologist, I stood mustering whilst the moon cast queer reflections on the silent channel before me. Then, suddenly, I saw it. With only a slight churning to mark its rise to the surface, the thing slid into view above the dark waters. Vast, Polyphemus-like and lonesome, it darted like a stupendous monster of nightmares to the monolith, above which it flung its gigantic scaly arms, the while it bowed its hideous head and gave vent to certain measured sounds. I think I went mad then. Of my frantic ascent of the slope and cliff, and of my delirious journey back to the stranded boat, I remember little. I believe I sang a great deal, and laughed oddly when I was unable to sing. I have indistinct recollections of a great storm some time after I reached the boat. At any rate, I know that I heard peals of thunder and other tones which nature utters only in her wildest moods. When I came out of the shadows, I was in a San Francisco hospital, brought thither by the captain of the American ship which had picked me up in mid-ocean. In my delirium I had said much, but found that my words had been given scant attention. Of any land upheaval in the Pacific my rescuers knew nothing, nor did I deem it necessary to insist upon a thing which I knew they could not believe. Once I sought out a celebrated ethnologist and amused him with peculiar questions regarding the ancient Philistine legend of Dagon, the fish god. But soon perceiving that he was hopelessly conventional, I did not press my inquiries. It is at night, especially when the moon is gibbous and waning, that I see the thing. I tried morphine, but the drug has given only transient surcease, and has drawn me into its clutches as a hopeless slave. So now I am to end it all, having written a full account for the information or the contemptuous amusement of my fellow men. Often I ask myself if it could not have all been a pure phantasm, a mere freak of fever, as I lay sun-stricken and raving in the open boat after my escape from the German man-of-war. This I ask myself, but ever does there before me a hideous, vivid vision in reply. I cannot think of the deep sea without shuddering at the nameless things that may at this very moment be crawling and floundering on its slimy bed, worshipping their ancient stone idols and carving their own detestable likeness on submarine obelisk of water-soaked granite. I dream of a day when they may rise above the billows to drag down in their reeking talons the remnants of puny war-exhausted mankind. Of a day when the land shall sink and the dark ocean floor shall ascend amidst universal pandemonium. The end is near. I hear a noise at the door, as of some immense slippery body lamming against it. It shall not find me! God, that hand! The window! The window! That's what happens when you lose your mind at sea. Epic story. Dagon. One of the best. 10 out of 10. Gill-boy approves. So, what could we possibly say about this story that hasn't already been said? Well, it's a classic, I guess. It's a masterpiece. Although those are things that have already been said. So, I don't really have too much more to offer on this video in regards to this story. Besides the fact that it's epic and absolutely frightening, because if you were to go through something like that, nobody of course would believe you. And what makes it frightening is that we've still to this day in our, I know humanity likes to think that we're at the epitome of our evolution and we have technology that we've never had before, so therefore we know all things and we're all knowing beings now, but we know nothing of the ocean. We know nothing about it. And that's frightening, because it is possible for Dagon and the deep ones to exist. The fear of the unknown is something that Lovecraft has always very much been about, and kind of putting humanity back in its place. That is one of our, I guess, our cardinal deadly sins, is our sin of pride, thinking that we're a lot more important than we are, that we know a lot more than we do. And so I really like this story because it's cool. It associates the ancient Philistine cult of Dagon with this kind of horrific, creature from the Black Lagoon, this kind of Gill-boy monster, and that they have different kinds of species within it, the kind of normal deep ones, the bigger ones, and then Dagon, and then as we learn in the Shadow over Innsmouth, Mother Hydra, and go deeper into the lore and how the great Cthulhu has blessed these beings, and how Dagon and Hydra and his angels per se worship Cthulhu and long to have him be the true ruler of this planet as well as the cosmos. So it's a great story. It's kind of like, Lovecraft's mythos is like an onion. You keep peeling and there's more and more and more and more, and the deeper you go, the more grander it is and the more it makes you cry. So I hope you enjoyed it. I don't want to ramble too on because I have a couple of more videos in store for you. I have to re-record a lot, and I'm really hoping that the buzzing sound from my broken port here doesn't drive you insane. Although, you know, I guess it's fitting for the course of Lovecraft. Now, to talk about the film, it's a great film. I will definitely discuss it further in depth when we read The Shadow over Innsmouth. But it's a great film. You know, Stuart Gordon film. The main character in it, you know, the acting's okay. You know, it's great. If you like kind of aquatic horror films, like your boy Gill-boy here does, you'll love it. Do I think it's deserving of a remake? Absolutely. I mean, we have photoreal technology now. You could do a lot more with the practical effects. And The Shadow over Innsmouth is, I would argue, the easiest of Lovecraft films to adapt. And it's amazing that it hasn't, but, you know, maybe it's a good thing with the current state of Hollywood. And we will always have Lovecraft stories, and they will always be here at the Grand Library at the Lagoon. Yeah, so far as the next video in this series, I will re-record The Outsider. And then after that, I might actually add like The White Ship. And maybe, or actually, I beg your pardon, I might actually do, after The Outsider, The Doom That Came to Sarnath, and then The White Ship, and then re-record The Statement of Randolph Carter, and then put that unnameable in there, and then do Pickman's Model and that triple feature thing, and do one more video for you all, and then record a substantial amount more, and then upload them once per week, so that way you, in your downtime, or if you miss Gill-boy and you just like to read and you want to come hang out at the Grand Library, you can come, and I will discuss with you some great horror literature. Just remember the dress code though, please, okay? Let's try to be, you know, respectful to the library, and remember to always use your library, okay? Because that's just so disrespectful, okay? But anyways, I hope you all had a wonderful time. That story is near and dear to me. Like I said, I wrote a script, feature-length film, that was heavily inspired by that short story, The Shadow over Innsmouth, The Call of Cthulhu. Hopefully one day I can turn it into a comic book, and hopefully I can make it into an actual film, and hopefully it will scare you all and make you question your existence and what you believe and all that stuff. You know, your typical Lovecraft story. He tends to make you question your own belief systems, irregardless of what they may be, which is why I love him as an author. He somehow finds a way to make you afraid. Like, I will definitely also do The Tree, because that's the first time any story has made me terrified of a tree. And I was like, wow, I've never looked at trees the same after I've read that story. So I will definitely have to do that one eventually. But for now, I'll do the ones that I mentioned and get us all caught back up to what we have. And if you want to re-listen to those videos, you're more than welcome to. If not, you can just wait for the newer ones that you have not. But anyways, I appreciate you all coming to the Grand Library and spending some time at the Lagoon once more. Always stay salty and stay spooky. And of course, I Dagon and Cthulhu Fataga.